Okay. All right. So here I'm on the phone with Colonel Bryan Hunt, correct?
Correct. That's my field commission. I'm actually a breveted major general uh, uh, as head of the let's see, the federal the federal our federal counterpart would be the defense secretary. I'm actually the defense secretary of Fourth Continental Congress.
Okay.
And I rarely use that title because I'm a field man. Basically, I'm a field commander. And that was given to me about a year ago. And it's like, okay, so I'm a major general, big fucking deal.
Right. And just for
Yeah.
clarity in this conversation, that you agreed to record with me. And as I indicated before I started recording, I just like to record everything because you never know when you start talking about a good subject that, valuable information for
Right.
others can be captured.
No, I hear you. And, I've had my contacts with the FBI because of the Bundy Ranch standoff. I was a commander for that operation, and you can actually go on to our intelligence website through CIB, which is Continental Intelligence Bureau .org, and you can read the Bundy Ranch report. And I urge every commander to read it because it discusses the problems that we faced involving multiple militias from multiple states that were involved that were trying to work with each other. And we also discuss the amount of double agents that we uncovered during that operation and subsequent operations.
Right. I appreciate that. And what you just said really stimulated me, Colonel, to want to, again, reiterate kind of the approach I'm taking with, being myself a self-appointed national militia coordinator.
I'm not self-appointed. I was appointed by a group of peers.
Right, and that's why I want
against my better judgment. That is
right.
I mean, and I became state commander 7 years ago, and against my better judgment, I didn't want to take it because it was going to put a target on my back.
Yeah, and let's clarify that for the listeners, Colonel, if you will, because on the one hand we have a government, Washington, D.C., President Trump, senators, Congress people. We have a U.S. military with the United States Armed Forces, and we hear general, colonel, lieutenant colonel, all that stuff being applicable to that. Then we have on in another part of the field, let's say, we have this thing about militia, which is kind of itself divided into a few segments, because you have on the one hand people who think of the militia in a very kind of dirty way or scary way, or these are a bunch of seditionists, all the way to what you're describing now as a more structured, regimented. Okay.
Yeah, hang on, give me a minute. I'm on a national call right now. I'm on a long distance call right now, but yeah, we can go over to Denny's. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so again, there's different facets. One of the things I like to do is kind of take the proverbial rug and shake it out, right? To let the truth and the reality and the higher understanding for the betterment of people.
Is, we have UN combat forces coming in, pre-staging. We have Chinese pre-staging in Mexico as well as Canada, and people are just not willing. They're not willing to pull their head out of the sand.
Well, let me add to that while on the one hand you can say there's people not willing, there's two things I would say about that. Number one is, as we both know, a great segment of our population is literally depatriotized, stupefied, dumbed down. They're not patriotic. They're liberal, progressive, mongrel loons.
You can thank the school system for that.
Of course. and we can go further and say who's behind that school system sabotage, right? We know that the government of the United States of America has been infiltrated and hijacked by global world communists. Those who have a
Oh yeah, no doubt about it, and they are now not hiding this.
right. So I want to clarify with you, and I wanted to have this connection with you because you're actually speaking with you and speaking with Michael as I did earlier. You guys are essentially kind of that. If we look at this in terms of layers, let's discuss again for the benefit of the listening audience here that when we think of militia, we can think of a bunch of, again, secret operations going on.
No, there's nothing secret about our operations. We keep everything above ground, and basically, we have nothing to hide.
That's right.
And so, give you an idea, and
you're breaking up.
Give you an idea. Sorry about that. I'm outside.
Okay.
Give you an idea. Case in point, the Ukrainian conflict. If you look at the Ukrainian conflict and the regular army, and then the paramilitary militia forces that are fighting Russians, that's basically what we are going to be relegated to. Because, that's originally what militia was for.
Right now, that on that point, I need to interject here because I want you to give some clarity. When you say relegated by who?
Well, if you take a look at the Second Amendment and the U.S. Constitution, the parameters are very defined as to how we are to operate.
Can you elaborate on it briefly?
Well, for example, the mission statement is directly involved in the Constitution. The Constitution spells it out in Article 1, Section 8. Our first duty is to repel invasion, put down insurrection, and uphold the laws of the Union. Nothing more, nothing less.
Right. So who would be, in terms of a command structure, who's going to call the strategies and the action plans?
Well, basically, the way it's supposed to work, if we have a constitutional sheriff, which there are only very few of those people, the sheriff would get hold of the state commander and say, "Hey, we got a problem in my county. Can you bring units in?" And then, the state commander or county commander who happens to take that call from the sheriff would then designate units to respond to the sheriff's call. Or if you have a governor that is upholding his oath of office, which we don't, the governor of the state is the commander-in-chief of the unorganized civilian militia, or what I call the well-regulated militia. Well, since we don't have a constitutional form of government, and we have basically 90% of our governors are basically subversives, basically it's the state commanders that would get together and determine what the threat is, where it's at, and how to respond to it, and what resources to allocate to it.
Right. Now that what you just said would make sense to kind of go back over them. Let's give the example of a county in terms of a physical battle, in terms of, the Russians and the Chinese just pulled ashore and Palm Beach, on the beaches there. The county sheriff can, contact, or like you said, should be contacting militia in the state for assistance, or the governor can contact the militia to say, look, we got a problem over here. That's all kind of fine and dandy for an actual physical confrontation. As you know, the big problem we have right now is more of an information war, and it's more of a political war. It's more of a subversive infiltration of our government by communists who are paying our elected government officials to do their bidding for them. So we have a war going on.
I'm well aware of that.
Right. And that leads me, forgive me, Colonel, because that leads me to my second point when you were using the example of maybe the state governor saying we have an issue here. In theory, if any state, even though the states are sovereign, if any state governor, if any state militia decided, hey, we've got an unconstitutional governor here, let's take him out by force, you can be sure that the corrupt federal government is going to call in probably the military, U.S. military, to quell what they would call an act of insurrection in a state, or an act of,
correct.
Right.
And that's why we've been able, that's why we've handled the things that we've handled with kid gloves.
Right.
Because take, for example, California. We have a governor that is in bed with the Chinese.
Right.
He has opened embassies in China. He has opened an embassy in Mexico, and he's done. He's stockpiled weapons, the Chinese weapons, to be given out to the fifth column when they're given the green light to act under a global order.
Right.
We've got all of this going on.
Right.
And it's no secret.
Right. And here's the other aspect of that. If there was an uprising, even of the militia within the United States against its own corrupt government that the Declaration of Independence says we have the right and duty to overthrow, if we did that, knowing that our government has been infiltrated by global worldwide communists, they would call in the white hats. The blue hats. They'd be calling in the UN. They'd be calling in, anybody they have in Russia and China to invade, and they would use that as an opportunity. And we know that that's what they're trying.
That's why we don't give them the opportunity.
Right, and we know that that's what they're trying to make happen.
Right. Well, it's going to happen, but we're not going to be the cause of that. We will respond to it, but we're not going to start it even.
Right. And this is why, again, this is a political war. It's a spiritual war. It's a legal war. And that's why all these issues concerning sovereigns, right, concerning, the national sovereignty movement, concerning, the movements with people like, if you're familiar with President Geiger, if you're familiar, which Michael was not, but are you familiar with?
Yeah, I'm not either.
Okay. So just to bring it to you.
Look and see if it's. No, just wait. I am not. Like I said, I'm more of a tactical officer.
Right.
I handle things at the tactical level.
Right.
So when it comes to the legal department and comes to those things, then I usually will turn that over to my legal department.
Right.
And any tactical questions or any tactical situations usually gets turned over to me.
Right. So think about what we just discussed. We kind of concur that the enemy, which is a new world order, one world government that has infiltrated and hijacked the United States of America and its government, there's essentially no way that the militia on a physical hands-on guns Second Amendment approach is going to get rid of this corrupt government. So there's only one of
it eventually will, but we're not going to fire the first shots.
Well, that's true.
We're not going to be the catalyst that causes an internal conflict in the country.
Right. And I would submit that while they are trying to get us patriots to fire the first shot, we know that, and we're holding off. They are happy to have us at bay, essentially waiting for them to fire the first shot, when for them it's not about firing shots. It's about changing laws. It's about changing corrupt, government officials. It's about slowly but surely, like a cancer, just pushing their leftist, liberal, progressive, transsexual, transgender, transhumanism agenda into the lives of we the people through the television, through movies, through music, through video games, through Hollywood, through billboards, and through their perversion, which we both know that the Ashkenazi Jews, the Zionist Jews, the communist Jews, that all got started with Marx and his predecessors and proteges. All right, this is what's happening. So many are of the mindset that it's about identifying and naming the enemy, the head of the snake. Who are they? What's the problem?
Go up there and talk to them. I'm busy. Yeah, I hear you. Basically, what we do is, and I've included these questions before, and they go, well, what do we do? And it's like, well, we train and we train and we train some more till we can't train any. And so that's basically what we're talking about.
Right, and that's them putting us like mice on the little wheels that they spin on. Just like you said, train some more, while they continue with their godless ambition of world domination and world control.
I hear you, and somewhere along the way, this is all going to come to a catalyst, and there's going to be a shoe that breaks the camel's back. Just go up there and I tried to tell him. Anyways, so that's basically it.
Right, gotcha. Let me just ask you for the record.
The big thing is we've located the Chinese soldiers both in Canada and Mexico. We know where they're at.
Right.
We know which bases they're at.
Right. Well, and that's a good thing, because if in fact this corrupt, communist infiltration of our government, if they do endeavor to have China or Russia come in, that's essentially what you guys are training to try to defend against. I would gather then. In turn,
exactly.
Right.
Well, if you look at the Constitution,
but see again,
it says the Constitution basically says we're to defend the Constitution. Judy, handle it. You know what I want when I always come here? Hang on, just a minute.
Okay.
No, just give me the turkey and soup. Anyway, and a soda. That's it. So basically, that's basically it.
Right.
We do what we need to do,
Right.
and if we see an invasion, then we defend against it.
Right, and the invasion is being set against us by our own government, even though it's an illegitimate government. It's the communists who have.
Not necessarily. Yeah, yes, to some degree. But if you take a look at the rhetoric of what China has said over the last 16 weeks, and the whole Taiwanese situation, that
Right.
has nothing to do with the illegitimacy of the federal government.
Well, except that the communists, again, when we reference them as being the Jews, the Zacharians, the mafia,
here's where you and I differ. I don't reference those people as being that, and this is where I disagree with Mike School on as well.
So you're not of a position that to the extent that people will say the Jews own the Fed, the Jews run the banks, the Jews own the media, the Jews put out all the propaganda. And when we say Jews, we're talking.
I don't subscribe to that.
You don't subscribe to any of that.
No.
Do you understand the idea of have you ever heard of Zionist Jews?
Yes, I'm familiar with what that is.
Yeah,
you know, this came, that idea came from the idea that the state of Israel would be created under the Balfour Treaty.
Well, actually, the Zionist Jews were started by Theodore Herzl in the late 19th century, which was a Jewish supremacist movement. And in the late 1800s, I'm sorry, late 1800s, early 1900s, all the papers.
What I can tell you, and this is where, you know, this is where I kind of separate things. There's good and bad in every race.
Right, and that's the thing. It's not a, see, one of the things that we discuss a lot is the anti-Semitism psyop. Oh, they're just a bunch of Jew haters, where it's a way for them to deflect and defend the things that they're doing. And when I say they, it's not about Jews. My neighbor's a Jew. My friend from high school's Jewish. My favorite attorney's Jewish. It's not about Jews. It's about the head of the snake, about those in high places like the Rothschilds, who were Jewish and funded every single war since the Napoleonic Wars of 1803 to 1815.
I understand that.
Right.
So, in fact, it was, if you take it a step further during the Second World War, or before the Second World War, before Hitler came to power, he was actually married to a Rothschilds. His father was married to a Rothschilds.
You're saying that Hitler's father was married to the Rothschilds?
Yes, he had married into the Rothschilds family.
Yeah. Do you understand that Hitler kicked the Rothschild banking system out of his country?
Oh, I know he did.
Right.
And he took control of it. He took control of a lot of. He took control of most of Western and parts of Eastern Europe.
No, actually, he was trying to regain the lands that were taken away in World War I. See, this is another problem we have. Is there's a lot of, you know, there's a video.
You're talking to somebody that's a student of history,
right?
And all about the First World War.
Right. I would encourage you and implore you to watch the 12-hour documentary Europa: The Last Battle, because I've certainly seen both sides, and what I've come to understand is that there are propaganda videos and stories and movies that have been put out over the last 60, 70, 80 years to give one story.
No doubt.
And then there is another unearthed history that when people research it and look into it, they find a completely different reality of what was going on. They discover that Hitler was simply trying to defend his homeland. He was trying to take back lands that belonged to Germany.
No, I don't agree with that. Not when you have 6 million people murdered.
That's if you want to believe 6 million people were murdered, because
I do. And,
in the late 19th century, they were using that same figure of 6 million people were starving, you know, in the late 19th century. So it's like a magical number for them to use.
No, it's not a magical number. My grandfather liberated some of those camps.
Liberated some of the camps, but what he actually experienced when he was at those camps. See, this is where, again, it's unfortunate.
Were you in the Second World War?
No, but I've watched the definitive documentary on the whole history.
You need to see some of the real documentary.
I've seen them both. That's the problem. See, this is where we're having a problem as Americans too, because you and I are on the same page as in terms of being patriots and Christians and believing in traditional family values, and we're tired of the communist, you know, infiltration. But yet they have so scattered and divided Americans, not only with the black, white, and the religion and everything else that they do to divide, but they've got the history rewritten. They've got history completely confused for people, so that people don't know up from down. They don't know left from right. And this is part of the problem that we're having.
Here's the situation. We know what the problems are. And this is a question I'm going to pose to you that I've posed to many other commanders. We know what the problems are. What are people willing to do to solve those problems?
Right. Ultimately, that's where
it boils down to.
Right. And the ultimate answer to that is a spiritual answer, and it's a moral question. And it's the fact that this is a spiritual war people have turned away from the Creator, God Almighty. They're seeking their own ways. And as a result, this nation is under judgment. So in a way, it kind of has to happen. There's nothing we can do about it, I guess. But there's those of us.
I don't completely agree, but I do maintain a chaplaincy within my command, specifically address those issues and those questions. But the militia as a whole, if you look at the Constitution, you go back to the Constitution and look at the Second Amendment, it was never meant to be a religious order.
Not religious, not religious. There's a difference between religious and moral. You don't have to be spiritual or religious to be moral. You know, I mean, our founding fathers were deists, right? They didn't necessarily push any particular religion.
Well, you had some founding fathers that were Christian.
Sure.
You had some founding fathers that were deists. Some were Masons. Some were, Rosicrucians, which I don't subscribe to, but some did.
Right. Yeah, George Washington professed to be a Christian. Thomas Jefferson professed to be a Christian.
Yes, but Washington was a Mason.
Right, but then see, here's another one of their divisive tactics. You've got people that believe Masons are smart, intelligent people that were kind of running the show. You got other people that say they're baby-eating bloodsuckers, right? It's really problematic, all of these divisions that have been created, and that's why. That's why
we stay away from divisions, and we find it. We deal with a particular problem and work the problem.
Right, and I think in terms of the militia, the whole approach that I've been trying to promote, which is to me a superior approach, is an open-ended front end. We the people are the militia. Period. We the people are. And if we had
put on a uniform and carry a weapon, doesn't mean that you're militia. Everyone that is an American from the age of 17 up to 45, but we've extended it to 75, is a member of the militia. Right.
So in theory, if we had, I always say it like this. Imagine if over the last 30 or 40 years, every person who served in the military, especially Navy SEALs, Green Beret, Army Rangers, when they got out, they scratched their head and said, man, what if our nation ever gets overrun? What if our government ever gets hijacked and goes rogue? I think I'll open a militia headquarters in my county, and I'll step up to the plate, and I'll do gun safety training for families and children. I'll do, meetings every month on the laws and the Constitution. We'll have an annual barbecue. We'll all wear a T-shirt that says Second Amendment, I am militia, and we'll organize it in a good way up front. If that had been done over the last 30 or 40 years, we'd have all kinds of trained and properly educated persons that would be able to quell any kind of even an internal problem, like the January 6th issue, like January 6th, which was a complete, farce.
Well over for 30 years. I mean, I've rubbed shoulders with Norman Nelson, J.J. Johnson, John Trockman. I know all those guys.
Right.
Personally.
Right. And to the extent that there's the military aspect of the militia is certainly, the focal point, right, of the militia. And it's really the only thing that most people understand it to be. However, that military aspect of it is pointless if we're not united. In other words, I completely agree with you there. You've heard the old saying, right? That, you hear these stories about how China and Russia says, they'll never invade America because there's a gun behind every blade of grass. We might all have guns, but we're not organized. We're not organized in every single county, in every single state.
We've been working on this problem for as long as I've been in the militia, which is about 30 years.
Well, there you go. So that indicates
the problem that you have is you've got a lot of chiefs. They don't have enough Indians, or they've got Indians and not enough chiefs.
And that's why I think it's pretty evident that there's never been a smart strategy and a smart approach to having that chief in every county who can step up to the plate to help, organize the Indians in his community. And that's ultimately the approach I've been trying to take with saying we need a point man or point woman in every county. We need a state coordinator in every state. Well, let me let you go because I know you're getting ready to have a bite to eat there. And
yeah, you know what? I'll save your phone number and we'll talk later on tonight if you're available.
Sure thing. Call me anytime, Colonel. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Colonel Hunt and
Who's in the military?
militia, militia, because they use the same terms, colonel, commander, in the militia when they're in the militia.
Was she in the U.S. military?
Sound like a female to me too at first, but I think it was a male, probably an older guy with that kind of just a raspy voice.
It sounded like a woman to me. Sure sounded like a woman.
Sorry, period. I was on the other line with Colonel Hunt in the militia in California, period. Call me back, exclamation point.